You are dismissed, Miss Marlowe. A month's wages, a character in my own hand, and the gig at 7 tomorrow morning." "Then you had better write the character tonight, Your Grace," said the governess, "because at 7 tomorrow morning you will not be able to look at me." The Duke of Jorrow, who had put down 11 men in the Lords with a single sentence, and had never once been answered back in his own library, discovered that he had nothing whatever to say. She stood on the far side of his desk in the gray merino she had worn every winter day for 2 years, with chalk on her cuff and her hands quiet in front of her. Hester Marlowe, 26, the daughter of a Marchbury bookseller, engaged in haste in the Black February 2 years ago, when there had been nobody else in the world willing to come into a house of that much grief. "You will not make this harder than it is," said Lucian. "I have no intention of making it harder. I intend to make it clear, which is different, and then I shall go upstairs and pack." Her voice did not rise. "May I ask what I have done?" "You have done nothing." "Then I should like that written in the character, if you please, in those words, 'nothing.'" "Miss Marlowe." "Because Cordelia is 11, and reads everything that is left on a hall table. And one day she will read whatever you write about me, and she will want to know why." Lucian got up and went to the window, which was cowardice, and stood looking out at the frost on the south terrace. "Lady Farrand has petitioned the Court of Chancery," he said. Behind him, silence. "She has petitioned for the guardianship and the removal of both children from this house to her own at Wen. She is their mother's mother. She has a claim the court will hear, and she has set out her grounds in 9 paragraphs which I have read 11 times. He heard his own voice go flat. 6 of the 9 are about you. Me. That the children of the late Marquis of Denhall's daughter are in the sole charge of a young woman with no French, no music, no drawing, no seminary training, and no connection. The daughter of a shopkeeper, engaged without advertisement, without a single reference from a family of rank, by a bachelor uncle of 36 who is never in the nursery." He turned round. "Those are her words, not mine. She has also stated, and this is the paragraph that will do the damage, that in 2 years under your care, Tobias, Denhall has not spoken one word." Hester Marlowe's face did something he could not read. "And that is true," said Lucian. "Is it not? Whatever else is false. The boy has not spoken since the carriage. He was 5. He is 7. There is a physician in London who says nothing, and a physician in Bath who says a great deal, and neither of them has produced one syllable, and a court that is asked to weigh a shopkeeper's daughter in a schoolroom against a marchioness with a house at Wen is going to read that paragraph and read nothing else. So you are sending me away to look respectable." "I am sending you away," said the Duke of Jorrow, "because I have been advised by 3 separate men of law that if I do not, I shall lose them both by Michaelmas. Madame Falk arrives on Thursday. She had 8 years with the Ashcombe girls. She has French, Italian, the harp, and a letter from a bishop, and she costs £120 a year, and she is everything the 9 paragraphs require me to produce." His hands had closed on the back of the chair. "It is not a judgment upon you. It is arithmetic." "It is not arithmetic. It is only that arithmetic is easier to say." He looked at her. "Your Grace, I am going to say 4 things," Hester said, "and then I shall not trouble you again, and I shall go at 7, and I shall not say good-bye to them in front of you, because that would be a scene, and I do not fight with scenes." She drew a breath. "First, Cordelia has read every book in the West Bay of this room, including your father's Livy, and she keeps a book of her own in which she has written out the names of every tenant on this estate, and what is the matter with their roofs, because nobody else in this house has troubled to, and she thinks somebody ought. Second, Tobias can read. He reads better than his sister did at his age. He does his sums in ink, and he has never once made a blot. And if you had come up 2 flights of stairs at any time in the last 5 months, you would know that. I have been. Third, said Hester Marlowe. I have written to you once a month for 2 years, 23 letters. They are a page each about them, what they have learned, what has frightened them, what Tobias needs. I did not put them in the post. I put them in your hand or on that desk. I know you did not read them, because in the 11th I asked you a direct question and you have never answered it. Lucian did not move. And fourth, her voice altered for the first time and went very low and very steady, and it was the sound of a woman spending something she could not get back. I do not blame you for that. I want you to hear me say it, because you will not believe the rest if you think I am wounded. Your brother and his wife went into a river on the Wen Road in the February I came here, and I came into a house where the nurse had been screaming since Tuesday and the master of it had been sitting in this chair for 4 days with the curtains shut. I have watched you carry it for 2 years. You have paid for everything and provided everything and been in that nursery 11 times, and I have counted, and I have never once thought you a bad man. She lifted her chin. I have thought you a frightened one. There is no shame in it. But you are about to do something out of fear that you will not be able to undo. And I am the only person in this house who is paid too little to be afraid of telling you so. The fire cracked. Somewhere far above them, 2 flights up, a door opened and shut. You will be at Marchbury, Lucian said when he could. Your father's shop. My father died in the spring. I have an aunt at Loddon who lets rooms and £31, and a character in your hand saying nothing. She curtsied. 7 o'clock, your grace. Miss Marlowe, the question in the 11th letter. She stopped at the door. I asked whether you would come up and sit in the schoolroom for 1/2 hour once, without any occasion, not at Christmas and not when a physician was in the house, only to be in the room. Hester Marlowe's hand was on the doorframe. Tobias asked me to ask you. He could not ask you himself. That is the whole of the question, and it is 2 years old, and it does not matter now. She went out and shut the door quietly, which was worse than if she had slammed it. Lucian Denhall, 6th Duke of Jorrow, stood in his own library for some time. Then he went to the great desk and opened the 3rd drawer on the left, where his secretary put everything that was neither business nor law nor from the house, and took out a bundle of paper tied with a bit of green thread, and counted 23 folded sheets. He read them all. It took him until the small hours, and he read the 11th 3 times, and then he sat with his hands over his face in a room where the fire had gone out. At 6:30 in the morning he was at the foot of the stairs. He had rehearsed it, that she would remain, that Madame Falk could be paid off, that he would go into Chancery with a shopkeeper's daughter, and know French and be laughed at from here to Westminster, and take his chance. Mr. Wickham, his secretary, was in the hall with 2 letters, and the face of a man who has been up all night with lawyers. The first letter was from Lady Farrand's attorneys, and it had come by express at 5, and it stated that in view of his Grace's assurances, a further affidavit would be filed on Monday, and that the court would be informed of the change in the nursery arrangements, and that if the person complained of remained in the house 1 hour past the date named, the petition would proceed on the ground of willful defiance and be heard at the earliest sitting. The second was from his own counsel, and it was 1 line, on no account keep her past the day. The gig went at 7. Lucian watched it from the library window, standing well back from the glass, because he had discovered in himself the additional cowardice of not wishing to be seen watching. Frost on the avenue. Her box on the seat beside her, 1 box and the gray merino, and the housekeeper crying openly on the steps, and the head groom driving her himself, which he had not been ordered to do. At the turn of the avenue, she looked back at the house, not at the windows of the library. At the 2 windows on the 2nd floor, at the north end, where the schoolroom was. Then the gig went round the lime trees, and out of sight. Madame Falk arrived on Thursday with 3 trunks, a harp in a case, and the bishop's letter in her reticule. She was 50, upright, spotless, and entirely competent, and Lucian could find no fault in her whatsoever, and he searched. She had the schoolroom rearranged on the first afternoon. She had the timetable copied out fair and pinned to the door. French before breakfast, harp at 11, deportment at 3. She required the pupils to stand when she entered. She reported to him on the Saturday, in the library with her hands folded, that Lady Cordelia was clever, willful, and grossly indulged, and that Lord Tobias was a difficulty. "A difficulty," said Lucian. "He is obstinate, your grace. There is nothing amiss with the boy's throat. I have had Dr. Pell's opinion of it in writing at my own request. It is temper and habit, and it has been petted for 2 years." Madame Falk's chin was serene. "It will yield to consistency. I have begun by requiring him to say good morning before he is given his breakfast. He has now missed 4 breakfasts. He will not miss a 5th. "He will have his breakfast," said Lucian. "Your grace, if the point is conceded now. He will have his breakfast at 8 o'clock every morning that he is under this roof, and so will you, madame, and we will not have this conversation again." He heard himself and did not moderate it. "You may teach him the harp, the French language, and the deportment of a court, and I shall pay you £120 a year for it. You will not buy a word out of him with bread." Madame Falk inclined her head, unruffled, and went away with the serene certainty of a woman who has seen indulgent guardians before and knows they collapse in a fortnight. Lucian rang and asked for Mrs. Preing. The nurse was 61, had been in the house since his own childhood, and had screamed for 4 days in the February 2 years ago, and had not been quite steady since. She came in with her apron twisted in both hands and stood as far from him as the room allowed. "Mrs. Preing, I am going to ask you a question, and I want the answer, not the answer you think I want. Is there anything about Lord Tobias that I do not know?" The apron twisted. "Mrs. Preing." "He talks," said Mrs. Preing. Lucian put his hand flat on the desk. "To her," the old woman said in a rush. "Only to her, sir, and only in the schoolroom with the door shut, and only reading out of a book, and only a whisper, but it's words, sir. It's proper words, and I've heard it through the door 30 times if I've heard it once since the summer. And I never said, and Miss Marlowe never said, and if you turn me off for it I'll go, but I'd not have it thought she deceived you, because she didn't. She wouldn't." "Why," said Lucian very carefully, "did she not tell me?" "Because he made her promise." Mrs. Preing's face crumpled. "He wrote it on his slate, sir. She showed me because she didn't know what to do with herself over it. He wrote, 'Don't tell my uncle till I can do it right.' He wanted to say it to you first, out loud and properly like a gentleman does." She was weeping now. "And she kept it. 2 years she's had the one thing that would have made you look at her, and she kept it, because a boy asked her to." Lucian sat in that chair for a long time after she had gone. Then he untied the green thread again, and found the 19th letter, which he had read the night before and had not understood, and read it once more. "He is nearer than anybody in this house believes. I cannot tell you how near, because it is his to give and not mine, and if I spend it for him, he will have nothing of his own left to give anybody. Only be in the room, your grace. That is all it wants. Be in the room often and expect nothing, and one day it will not be me he says it to." He wrote to Loudon that night. He wrote 4 times and burned 3. The one he sent said that he had read all 23 letters, that he had answered the 11th at last, and the answer was yes, that Madame Falk could be paid off within the hour, and that he was aware he had no right whatever to ask and was asking anyway. Her reply came back inside 3 days, and it was 1 paragraph, and it was the most painful thing he had ever received. She could not come, not because she would not, she wrote that plainly, twice, in a hand that had shaken, but because if she returned to that house before the petition was heard, Lady Farrand's attorneys would have both children out of it by Michaelmas, and she would not buy her own vindication with Cordelia and Tobias. She begged him to be in the room. She begged him to keep the schoolroom fire lit and the North Bay books where they were, and to let Cordelia keep her tenant book, which mattered more than anybody understood. And she signed it, with a formality that went through him like a splinter, "Your Grace's obedient servant, H. Marlowe." Lady Farrand came herself in the 2nd week of November. She was 70, tall, gray, and had buried a husband, a son, and 21 months ago, on the Wen Road, 4 miles from her own gates, her only daughter. She sat in the long drawing-room with her stick across her knees and refused tea. "You have engaged a proper woman. My attorney tells me so." "I have." "Then you may keep them until the spring, and we shall see." Her voice did not soften, but her hand on the stick was not steady. "Understand me, Jorrow. I do not think you a bad man. I think you a man of 36 who has never had anything living put into his keeping, and I think that house of yours has been a mausoleum for 2 years, and I have sat at Wen 11 miles off with my daughter's children inside it, and not been able to get past your gates for pride." She stood up. "I am old and I am in a hurry, and I have gone to law because it was the only door left open to me. If you have a better one, use it. But do not tell me the girl in the merino gown was sufficient, because I asked her 3 times to bring them to Wen, and she wrote back 3 times that she had no authority in the matter and must refer me to you, and you never answered a single letter of mine either." Lucian had not known about the letters. There had been 4. Wickham found them in the same drawer. The house came apart quietly over the next 3 weeks, and he watched it happen from a distance of 2 flights of stairs. And then, for the first time in 2 years, from inside the room. He began going up at 4 o'clock. He did not announce it. He took the estate letters with him and sat in the low chair by the schoolroom fire, and read them while the harp lesson went on, and said nothing, and expected nothing. And the first afternoon Cordelia Denhall looked at him with such open, adult, unforgiving suspicion that he nearly left. By the 9th afternoon, she had begun to talk at him, which was not the same as talking to him, and consisted almost entirely of grievances. That Madame Falk had taken away the tenant book. That she had taken it because it was untidy, and because a lady does not concern herself with drains, and had put it in the locked press, and had said it would be returned when Cordelia could conjugate a French verb without sulking. That Tobias had not done a sum in 3 weeks. That Madame Falk had said, on the 4th of November, that Miss Marlowe had been sent away because she was not a lady and never would be, and that they were not to speak of her again in the schoolroom. "Is it true," said Cordelia, 11 years old, straight-backed, white to the lips, "that she is not a lady?" Lucian Denhall thought about a woman standing on the other side of his desk with chalk on her cuff, saying, "I have never once thought you a bad man. I have thought you a frightened one." "No," he said, "it is not true, and I have never in my life met anyone less likely to be mistaken about it, and I shall tell Madame Falk so tonight in those words." Cordelia burst into tears, which she had not done once since February of the year before last, and Lucian got out of the low chair, and did the only thing that occurred to him, which was to sit down on the schoolroom floor beside the fender, in a coat that cost 11 guineas, and let her cry against his shoulder. Tobias watched from the window seat with his slate on his knees. He did not come, but he did not go away either, and after some minutes he moved along the seat until he was within reach of the fender, and that was, Lucian understood perfectly well, an enormous concession. The tenant book was returned that evening. Madame Falk was informed, courteously, that she was to teach and not to govern, and that the schoolroom was not hers, and that Miss Marlowe's name would be spoken in that room as often as anybody in it pleased. She received it with dignity, and Lucian had the unpleasant sensation of having been just 3 weeks late to a woman who was not a villain, and was simply not the right woman. It was the 9th of December when they went. He came up at 4 as usual, and found the schoolroom fire lit, the timetable pinned to the door, a book open on the table at the Battle of Blenheim, and nobody in it. The harp was in its case. The window seat was empty. On Tobias's stool, set square in the middle of the room where it could not be missed, lay a folded paper with a hair ribbon laid across it to hold it down. Lucian read it standing. It was in Cordelia's hand, and it was the hand of a girl who had made a fair copy of something drafted more than once. Dear Uncle, we have thought about it very carefully for 11 days, and we have made our choice, and we are not being wicked. You said at dinner that we should be sent to Wen if Miss Marlowe came back, and Madame Falk says she is not to be spoken of, and so there is no way of having her here. Therefore we are going to her. We are aware what it means. We have written out what we are leaving so that you will see we have counted the cost and are not doing it in a temper. Beneath, in 2 columns, was a list. We leave the pony. We leave the doll's house that was Mamma's. We leave my tenant book, which you may keep, and please look at the Paget roof. It is the worst. We leave the silver mug with tea on it. We leave Papa's watch that is to be Tobias's at 12. We leave being a lady and a lord, which Madame Falk says is the greatest thing there is. We leave you, which we mind more than the rest, but you are grown up and you can come, and we cannot wait until spring because Tobias has stopped doing his sums. And at the bottom, in a smaller, rounder, 7-year-old hand that Lucian had seen on 10,000 slate sums, and never once on paper. We choose Marlowe, T.D. There was a postscript. Please do not turn off Mrs. Preing. She does not know. We did it after she went down. Lucian Denhall was in the yard 4 minutes later. It was 4:10, and the light was going, and there was frost already glittering on the mounting block. Cook accounted for a missing loaf, a cheese, and a stone bottle. The under-housemaid had seen the schoolroom cloaks on the back stairs at 2. Loddon was 11 miles by the turnpike and 13 by the fields, and there was 1 Loddon coach a day, and it went from the Bell at Amberry, which was 7 miles off, at 6:30 in the evening, and it was the only way a girl of 11 and a boy of 7 could get there before morning. And Cordelia Denhall knew the coach times because she knew everything. He took Wickham, the head groom, 4 men, and lanterns, and he was on the Amberry Road inside a quarter of an hour with the frost cracking under the hooves and his heart going like a hammer. And he prayed genuinely, awkwardly, out loud on a horse, for the first time since a February 2 years before, that they had kept to the road. The toll-keeper at Amberry Cross had seen them. 2 of them on foot, at about 3:30, going toward the town, the little one being carried on the big one's back at the last, and he had thought them a farmer's children, and had wished them good day, and had thought no more about it, and he was very sorry, and would his grace like a lantern. The Bell's yard was full of steam and noise when Lucian rode in. The Loddon coach standing loaded, the horses in, the guard up, 4 minutes from the off. and through the long-lit window of the inn parlor, in the yellow light of the fire and a dozen candles, he saw a woman in a gray merino gown kneeling on the boards with a cloak still round her shoulders, and a stone bottle on the table behind her, holding both of his brother's children hard against her, one in each arm. He came through the parlor door with his hat still on and frost on his shoulders, and three faces turned up at him at once. "They are not hurt," said Hester Marlowe, before anything else. "Cold, and Tobias's boots are wet through, and I have sent for dry stockings. Cordelia wrote to me on Tuesday to tell me what they meant to do and when. I came up on the day coach this morning, and I have been in this yard since noon, and I sent a boy to Jorrow at 3 with a note, and I can only think you were already on the road." "I was. I have engaged a chaise. The horses are being put to." She was still kneeling on the boards, and she made no move to rise, because there were two children clamped to her, and she plainly had no intention of being the one to let go first. "Your Grace, I want it said in front of them and in front of the landlord, who is behind you and has been listening for 10 minutes. I have not taken them anywhere. I have not written to them, I have not sent to them, and when the guard offered to lift them onto that coach at 4 o'clock, I told him that if he did I would have him off the box. They were going to Loddon. They are going home." "We are not," said Cordelia into her shoulder. "You are. We chose." "You did," said Hester, "and it was the bravest and stupidest thing I have ever heard of, and I have read your list, and you left the wrong things off it." Her voice was not entirely under control. "You left off 11 miles in the dark in December, and what your uncle would have felt at 4 o'clock, and what would have become of me if 2 children of that family had been found in my aunt's lodgings at Loddon in the morning." There was a silence in the parlor, and it lasted perhaps 3 seconds. "Don't send her away." It was thin and hoarse and cracked in the middle, and it came from the child under her left arm, and Lucian Denhall felt the whole room tip. Tobias had let go of her. He had turned round. He was standing on the boards in wet boots with his cloak dragging off one shoulder, looking up, and his face was screwed tight with the enormous physical labor of it. And he said it again, louder, because the first one had not been done right. "Don't send her away, Uncle, please." Lucian went down on one knee on the parlor floor of a coaching inn in front of a landlord, a guard, 2 grooms, and his own secretary. "Say it once more," he said, and his voice was not fit for the Lords or anywhere else. "Not because I did not hear you, because it is the first thing you have ever said to me, and I want to be certain of it for the rest of my life." "Don't send her away," said Tobias Denhall. "No," said his uncle, "I will not, on my word, and my word is worth something whatever else is not, never again." And then his brother's son walked into his arms, which had not happened, not once, in 21 months. And Lucian knelt on the boards and held on and looked up over the boy's head at Hester Marlowe, who had both hands pressed over her mouth and tears running freely down her face, and who nodded at him once fiercely, like a woman confirming a bargain. They went home in the chaise, all 4 of them, at 7 o'clock, with a hot brick at their feet and Tobias asleep, across 2 laps before Embury Cross. He drove to Wen himself 3 days later, and he took the children with him, and he took the folded paper with the hair ribbon still in the crease. Lady Farrand received them in a drawing-room that had been shut up for a year and a half. She was formidable for 11 minutes. Then Lucian put the note into her hands and made her read the list of what 2 children had been prepared to give up, and watched a woman of 70 come apart over the line about the silver mug and put her hand out blindly for the arm of her chair. And then Tobias Denhall, who had been coached in the carriage and had insisted on doing it standing, said, "Good afternoon, grandmamma," in a voice like a rusted gate, and Lady Farrand of Wen put her face into her hands and wept in front of her own footman. The petition was withdrawn before Christmas. She replaced it, at her own suggestion and her own cost, with an affidavit 9 paragraphs of it, since she had a taste for the form setting out that in her considered judgment, as the children's nearest surviving maternal relative, no woman in England was fitter to have the charge of them than Miss Hester Marlowe, daughter of the late bookseller of Marchbury, and stating in paragraph 7, which her attorney begged her 3 times to strike out, and which she refused to strike out, that the said Miss Marlowe had in 2 years accomplished what 4 physicians, 1 marchioness, and 1 duke had between them entirely failed to accomplish. "And now," said Lady Farrand on the last day of the year, with her stick across her knees and the whole business settled, "we come to the awkward part. Jorrow, you are going to make an ass of yourself, and I am going to prevent it." "Ma'am, you are going to offer for her." The old woman's eyes were perfectly clear. "Do not trouble to deny it. I have watched you look at that girl across 2 rooms and a pot of tea, and you are going to do it badly, because you are a man who has just got a child's voice back, and you will call it settling the household. So attend to me. She will not be in your house when you ask her. She is engaged as their governess. She returned on the 12th. "Then she is your servant," said Lady Farrand, "and no woman of any spirit can refuse a duke in his own house on his own wages, and if she accepts you, you will never for 1 hour of your life be certain that she could have said no, which would serve you exactly right, and would make her miserable, and I did not withdraw a chancery petition to watch that happen." She rapped the stick once on the floor. "Miss Marlowe comes to Wen on Lady Day as my companion, at £80 a year, which is more than you pay her. The children come to me for 6 weeks in the summer, which I have wanted for 2 years and been too proud to beg for. And you, sir, may drive 11 miles like everybody else, and sit in my drawing-room with my dogs on your boots, and court her properly, and be refused if she chooses. I shall enjoy it very much." She did enjoy it very much. He drove the 11 miles 31 times between Lady Day and August. He was made to sit through a great deal of whist. He was twice sent away, because Miss Marlowe was reading to Lady Farrand and could not be interrupted, and once because it was raining, and the old woman said the roads were unfit, which they were not. He wrote to her, and this time the letters went in the post, and this time they were answered, and it was in the letters, more than in the drawing-room, that the thing was really done. He told her about the years he had not spoken of to anybody. The February, the 4 days with the curtains shut, the 11 months in which he had genuinely believed the kindest thing he could do for 2 orphan children was to pay for everything and stay out of the room, because he had loved his brother and had nothing in him but grief, and had thought grief was catching. She wrote back that grief is not catching, but silence is, and that he had been forgiven for it in the schoolroom long before he thought to ask. He asked her in the schoolroom on the 22nd of August, at 4 in the afternoon, with the fire out and the window open, and the harp Madame Falk having departed in April with an excellent character, £120, and in the end, real warmth on both sides, standing in the corner, because Cordelia had decided to learn it after all. He asked badly. He had prepared something, and it went entirely to pieces. "I have no argument to make," he said. "I have no settlement to offer that would mean anything to you, and I am not going to insult you by pretending this is for their sake, because it is not. I have wanted it since a night in December when you knelt on the floor of an inn and would not let go of them, and if they were both grown and gone tomorrow, I should want it exactly the same. Hester, you told me once that I was a frightened man. I am frightened now. That is the whole of my case. Hester Marlowe stood by the schoolroom table with her hands quiet in front of her, the way she had stood on the other side of his desk, with chalk on her cuff 19 months before. "Answer the 11th letter," she said. "I have answered it every afternoon since the 9th of November, and I intend to go on answering it until I am carried out of this house," said Lucian. "I shall be in the room." "Then yes," said Hester, and put her hands in his. They were married in October in the church at Jorrow, and Lady Farron came in her own carriage with 4 horses, and made everybody wait 11 minutes, so that it should be understood she had come by choice. Mrs. Preen cried from the beginning of the service to the end, and had to be given 3 handkerchiefs. Cordelia Denhall walked in front of the bride with the flowers, in a state of ferocious dignity, having first inspected the churchyard path for anything that might be tripped over. And when it was done, at the chancel step, in front of 200 people, Tobias Denhall said, clearly and slowly and with a great deal of preparation, "Good morning, Aunt Hester." He was 7, and he got no further, because his new aunt sat down on the chancel step in her wedding gown and put her arms round him, which the Duke of Jorrow was afterwards informed by 4 separate ladies was not at all the correct thing, and which he regarded then and ever afterwards as the finest moment of his life. They lived at Jorrow. The tenant book was continued, in Cordelia's hand, with the Paget roof entered as mendied in the first month. She was 23 when she began keeping the whole estate's accounts, and 30 when she was known for it in 3 counties. Tobias spoke a little more each season, and stammered when he was tired, and stopped minding it at about 11, and read aloud in the schoolroom every evening after dinner to whoever would sit and listen, which was generally everybody in the house who could get in. The hair ribbon and the folded list are in a frame in the library at Jorrow, hung low, at the height of a seated man's eye, beside the desk, where a duke once told a governess that a month's wages and a character were the end of the matter. And the schoolroom fire is lit every afternoon at 4, whether there is a lesson or not, and there is a low chair beside it that nobody else is permitted to sit in. Lucian Denhall was in that chair most days for 30 years, with the estate letters unopened on his knee, expecting nothing, listening to his wife hear a boy's reading and a girl's arithmetic. And if he was ever asked, and he was asked once at a dinner, by a young man who wished to know how a man of his consequence had come to marry a bookseller's daughter, he said that his brother's children had made a list of everything in the world they were prepared to lose, and had put her name at the bottom of it, and that no one in his family had ever seen any reason to argue with them.